Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Between the Sharks. Behind me, as you may recognize, is our 27 Ford Touring Hot Rod project. And today, speaking of hot rodding, we are going to channel the spirit of the earliest of hot rodders. So basically, we're going to cobble up some stuff and attach something to the frame to hold this gas tank. Now, if you've ever been under a hot rod that was built in the 40s or 50s, you know what I'm talking about. The chassis work was, well, rudimentary? Is that polite? The idea of metal finishing your chassis and putting it on the internet for everyone to oogle at just really didn't happen till the internet. So if you're not familiar, the 26, 27 Fords had their fuel tank under the cowl. That's what that thing's for. It's not a vent, it's a open her up and fill the fuel tank. And that's because they didn't have fuel pumps. So the fuel was gravity fed down to the engine, and that's how the whole thing worked. Now, prior to 26, 27, I think the gas tanks were all under the seats. If you've ever seen the famous Model T chassis getting driven off the assembly line with a guy sitting on the gas tank, that's prior to 26, 27. Now, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but it's my understanding that the fuel tank placement changed because the under the seat placement created an issue if you had lower than maybe 50% fuel on a hill. If you tried to go uphill, well, gravity just couldn't do what gravity would normally do because it was working the wrong way. So what they did was they moved the fuel tank to a higher position. That stayed true for the Model A's, and then eventually fuel pumps and things and whatnot. Now, as far as our situation goes, like you can see that we've turned the firewall around, which creates a recess to allow us to have a bigger motor. We're also going to be running a fuel pump right off the side of that small block Chevrolet. So gravity is not what we're relying on to feed the engine. So in the last video, if you guys have been following along, thank you if you have, we started to mock up the fuel tank back here. So today, we've got to come up with some kind of mechanism to keep it there. So now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a stock Model A frame. I have not Z'd it, I have not stepped it, I have not done much of anything except split the wishbones, which are, actually those might be Model A. I don't really remember. But anyway, as you can see, the Model A frame ends at the rear crossmember. It does not extend any further. Up here is our subframe that I built to hold this body. So ideally, we've got to come off the frame. And I have scoured the internet and pretty much everything I have seen on how to solve this problem to add a 32 tank or whatever else. It's pretty janky. Now behind me is the fuel tank that we kind of mocked up on last week's episode. 13-gallon tank, I think 40 inches long, something like that. Dinosaur juice is about 6 pounds a gallon, so that plus tank plus whatever, 80, 85 pounds is what we should be expecting. Now granted, there's gonna be a lot of movement on the back end, so 85 pounds isn't a ton of weight when you're talking about welding steel to stuff, but we do want it to be pretty sturdy because, you know, if that falls off, we got a world of problems. First of all, we're not gonna be able to get away from the wreckage that we cause, and that's, well, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? All right, gang, I did remove this since the last video because I was pretty sure I was gonna just klutz right into it and really, really wang it and take a scratch and dent item and make it significantly worse. So, let's get her back where she's gotta go. Now gang, where she's gotta go, well, that's a little subjective, you see. It's gotta go where it looks cool, because if you're building one of these things and it doesn't look cool, you're kind of missing the point, because performance-wise, on every single level, a base model Tesla will outperform this thing. So will a Honda Fit. So, you know, it's the nostalgia and the fun of the whole thing. And, you know, it looking like one of those. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're like following in a tradition of, that looks cool, I want to have one of those, you know what I mean? So we just gotta get it where we think is good. You can tell by looking at it. All right, gang, have a look-see here. So I can just raise you on up. I think it looks pretty cool, actually. I kind of like the height against the fenders, but we got one more thing we gotta look at to make sure we're, you know, thinking all ahead like. So fellas, last week I also introduced you to these super awesome accessory bumper guard things that I found somewhere in a pile of somebody's junk. and then spent my hard-earned money on. Now, what I was thinking was, not this, although it might work that way. I was kind of thinking, what about that? Nerf bars to sort of create a little half bumper to protect the fenders, and also be a step, and I'll put a step maybe on top of the fender so that you can climb in, just hop over the back. Not quite Dukes of Hazzard, but maybe more like Archie and Jughead, Anyway, this all needs to tie together as well. So in theory, I think I kind of like how it fits right in here. So it either needs to stick out like so, or I need to go up with the gas tank just a little bit more. Let's see what that'll do. I mean, that might do it. That might do it. So hardware-wise, these things were included with the tank, and as you can see, this bolts onto something, this clampifies the tank down. So these also sort of need to be incorporated because we need to decide, where they go. Remember that thing I said about looking cool? Like the spacing on these matters for looking cool. Brand new day, gang. Last night I almost did some really dumb stuff because I was in a hurry. I was gonna build a bracket. It was gonna be bad because I was tired and in a rush, and I was gonna weld it to the subframe. Today we're gonna use our noodles. We're gonna build something that bolts on to the subframe, like a whole bracketry system. So let's dive in. At this point, my little barrel hoopy guys are 6 inches in from the weld bead. I think it looks pretty good, but that also creates the next problem. These little mounting spots, I guess I could rotate it any way that made sense, but right now down makes the most sense. The trick is, you guys come under here with me, there's not really anything to attach to, and at this point, let me demonstrate with some whistling. The cross member is doing this. So over here, getting from the cross member to the tank is not that big a deal. However, here, if I wanted to come straight off it, it's kind of a big deal. So, the guy's using his noodle, and I'm trying to figure out if there's any reason that this can't just be supported by the subframe. Like, why cobble into the rear cross member? It's only essentially 85 pounds, which is a small passenger, which is, back here. So the subframe should be able to handle that, no problem. The subframe's bolted to the frame, so that might be my best bet. Let's raise the car up and take a look. Going up. It's a little difficult to get you guys crammed in here, but the short version of the situation is the back of the subframe is right yonder. So coming down, what is that? Looks like 5 1/4 inches. Dropping 5 1/4 inches off this, then turning this away, and then building a gusset seems like the way to go. The actual spring cross member, maybe. Oh no. Don't know. Also don't like the idea of welding to that and doing the whole, it just doesn't seem like the right answer. Ultimately, that's gonna be what we need to do if we're gonna do the bumper guard thing. But because we just saw that they need to be further out, maybe we treat this like 2 different projects, because it's 2 different projects. We just need to make sure that we have room for both to happen, which I think we do. Speaking of room, this has got to go out. Don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall. Don't fall. Something like that. Sure? I don't know. The holes we drill is going to be based on the hardware we've got, which that looks about right. So we'll start with 5/16. Again, with this hardware, 85 pounds, man. 2 5/16 bolts, even if they're whatever not grade 5 is, regular, the shear strength is going to be A-okay. Welcome to the workbench du jour. I swear I just cleaned the shop, but that was probably like months ago. And yep, can't get to nothing. All right, fellas, we're in business. We've got our holes drilled in this, not in our subframe yet, but that's all right. Now we need our drop downs, and I have some of this left over 1x2. I think it's 11 gauge. I don't know where it came from, but I got it. So we're gonna cut some chunks of it, weld them onto this guy, and that will be how we kind of do our drop off the subframe to catch our gas tank. This is genuinely my least favorite part of fabrication, gang. Just cutting stock steel. Let me explain to you. Now there's a ton of ways to cut steel. Most of you guys are familiar with them. There's abrasive saws like this, band saws like that. There's upright band saws, cold saws, portabands, sawzalls, grinders, all the stuff. You know how it is. I've got a lot of that stuff. I don't have a portaband, but I don't like having this thing set up indoors because it throws a ton of sparks everywhere and creates a ton of dust, and it's kind of big, and anywhere I have to put it indoors, if I have long stock, I can't, you know, can't feed it through, basically. And then this bandsaw is, you know, a great idea, but it's worn, slapped out. Should call it the Ninja, not because it cuts stuff, but because it throws blades. That's what it's good at, pitching blades right off the wheels, because realistically, brand new, this was like a $300 bandsaw. A bona fide professional bandsaw is like over $1,000. And that bandsaw and this abrasive saw are no joke hand-me-downs from fabrication shops I used to work for. And when they upgraded, they said, "Hey doofus, you want this old junk?" And I said, yeah I do. So I went and got it, and that's a very gracious gift. But if you've watched the channel at all, I cannot make that bandsaw do what I need it to do. It just keeps kicking blades off, and I spend more time working on it than it spends cutting. That's just how it is. So if you saw it just then, the blade is still off it because I just gave up at some point. Now, I gotta set this thing up, so we're gonna do that here in just a second. Now, for this, because I've just got 2 quick cuts, I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in and just use it right there on the ground. But last night, this is part of the reason that work just stopped, because I was like, oh man, I gotta go set up the saw and run some power to it and lights and blah, 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 blah. So, believe it or not, I ordered myself a brand new tool. I'm not gonna say what it is. It'll be here soon. Hopefully to solve these metal cutting woes, even the simplest ones. I'm excited about it, I really am. So anyway, let's cut some steel. That's all the dust that just fell out of it, let alone what it threw everywhere. Anyway, don't love these things. Welcome to the workbench, team. While you were gone, I went ahead and drilled the holes in the subframe to mount this thing, which I thought, who would want to watch a guy drill some holes again? And then, you know, it wasn't as uneventful as I thought. As I punched the C-clamp, and on this thumb, a piece of drill bit shaving landed on there, hot enough to cauterize it, which, again, not uneventful. But at this point, we've got, come look, all the way around. Basically, this is toward the back of the car. So I've got 5 1/4 inch drop downs, grand total of like 5 1/2, just shy, probably a 1/16. And then we will add angle iron holder oners. All right, fellas, here's our bracketries. Just got to figure out where to drill these holes in our angle iron. What it looks like is one right at the end and one that spacing out, which seems way too simple. Let's drill some holes. All right, fellers, we're back. Drilled 2 more holes in each of these pieces that line up using our brackets for the spacing, you know, because that's what makes sense there. Now we just got to get these things tack welded on. Try not to drop anything. You can almost see what I'm doing, but not quite. Sure. All right, gang, bit of a moment of truth. We're gonna have to see how we did here by test fitting. Obviously, everything's just tack welded. If you've seen my transmission crossmember video, I had to remind myself of that because I wanted to weld all this stuff up on the bench, weld all this stuff up on the bench. But, you know, we got a lot going on back here in this area. We've got this, any bumpers or bumperettes we want to use. Got to put the sending unit in. Got like exhaust has to go through here. There's a ton of stuff. So not saying we're going to change anything, but it's a hot rod, gang. So everything changes a couple of times. Plus we have all of the bracketries that hold this rear end in place are just tack welded. So we have a ton of final welding to do back here on the car. All right, enough of that. Let's see how she does. See how many dents I can find on my way over. Wow. Wow. All right. Obviously, like all other things, I did not come prepared with the correct hardwares. All right, everything is a little loose, but spacing the strap seems pretty much right. Gas tank can slide back and forth, but we're pretty close to our original marks. That's also good news. And if you see right in through here, we got enough room that hopefully if this bounces just a little bit, it'll not wang the car. And if it starts to bounce a little bit, we can easily add a gusset from, okay, where are you guys? From in here over to the angle iron that'll clear the rounded tank. So maybe we'll go ahead and plan to do that anyway. These can get cleaned up a little bit, but you know, we may end up building a Nerf bar. We may end up figuring out how all of it works with these things, which are pretty cool, but that should all happen after the fenders are finally in place. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with this whole thing. So I think it looks super cool. The price was definitely right, and I'm happy with the bracket solution coming off the subframe instead of the frame. Now, bumpers, whatever else, we may need to explore getting into the frame, but for now, this is pretty good. Plenty more to do here. I've ordered a sending unit. I'm gonna try to make work with this tank. We've got to run fuel lines and petcocks and all of that stuff. And of course, while we're back here, you know, this fender situation needs to be finalized. Plenty more to do. So if you liked what you saw today, please consider subscribing. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me personally, but a ton also to the channel in general and its growth and the goals that we have around here with the YouTubes at Between the Sharks. Good luck on your projects out there. We will see you next time. There's plenty to do. Parts are in the mail, and yeah, there's plenty to do while we wait for them. So good luck on your projects. See you next time.